There is a franchise in the National Football League with a history unlike any other. Built on defiance, on rebellion, on the idea that the men who wore the silver and black were different, tougher, more feared, more dangerous than anyone sharing a field with them. A franchise that won 3 Super Bowls. A franchise that produced Hall of Famers. A franchise with an aura so powerful that simply pulling on that helmet meant something in this sport, in a way that almost no other uniform ever has. And then there's the other side of that same franchise. The side that has burned through hundreds of millions of dollars on players who delivered almost nothing. The side that has watched signing after signing, each one announced to the fan base with confidence, each one promised as the missing piece that would restore the silver and black to greatness, dissolve into injury, embarrassment, chaos, and outright organizational disaster. Today, we are counting down the 10 worst free agent signings in Raiders history. Every contract figure, every statistic, every fact you are about to hear has been verified. Some of these signings were simply a waste of money. Some cost this franchise future draft capital it desperately needed. And some were so spectacularly, historically terrible that they damaged this organization for years after the player was long gone. This is the list every Raiders fan already knows deep in their bones. Let us count it down.
Number 10, Ray Buchanan, 2004. 5-year, $11.36 million contract. Ray Buchanan earned his nickname honestly. Big Play Ray was not a marketing slogan. It was a description. He was a genuine playmaker, a fiery and competitive cornerback who had spent 7 productive seasons with the Atlanta Falcons, earned a Pro Bowl selection in 1998, led the NFC in interceptions in 1997, and helped Atlanta reach Super Bowl 33. He was a legitimate NFL defensive back who had a long, real career. But by 2004, he was 32 years old, and the Falcons had released him. And the Raiders, who already had 3 former first-round cornerbacks on their roster in Charles Woodson, Nnamdi Asomugha, and Philip Buchanan, decided the answer to their safety problems was signing Buchanan, not at cornerback, but at free safety. A completely different position, requiring a completely different skill set, asking a man in the final year of his career to do something he had never primarily done before. He started all 16 games. He recorded 1 interception for the entire season. He was released after 1 year, never played another NFL snap, and retired quietly. The Raiders paid $11 million for a veteran cornerback to play out of position in the twilight of his professional life. In dollar terms, it was not catastrophic. In judgment terms, it was the perfect opening note for a decade of deeply questionable decisions.
Number 9, Aaron Brooks, 2006. Signed as starting quarterback. The year was 2006. The Raiders desperately needed a starting quarterback. The man they wanted most, Drew Brees, 27 years old, coming off a serious shoulder injury, but clearly still an elite-level talent, chose New Orleans instead, and went on to lead that franchise to a Super Bowl victory. So, Oakland settled for the quarterback Brees had just replaced. They signed Aaron Brooks. Brooks had been New Orleans' starter for 6 seasons, with some productive years, good enough to earn induction into the Saints Hall of Fame. But he arrived in Oakland at age 30, coming off a 13-17 touchdown to interception ratio in his final season with the Saints. In his very first game as a Raider, he was sacked 9 times by the San Diego Chargers in a 27-0 shutout. 9 sacks in a single game. The following week against the Baltimore Ravens, he dislocated his shoulder and missed the next 7 weeks. When he returned, he went winless in every game he started. Oakland finished 2-14, the worst record in the NFL. That 2-14 record delivered the first overall pick in the 2007 draft. Oakland used it on Jamarcus Russell, the most catastrophic quarterback bust in NFL history. Aaron Brooks did not cause the Russell disaster, but his own failure was the direct bridge that led there. He threw 3 touchdowns and 8 interceptions in 1,105 yards as a Raider, was released, and never played professional football again.
Number 8, LaMarcus Joyner, 2019, coming to Oakland with a vision for rebuilding the Raiders' defense. One of their first major free agent statements was signing LaMarcus Joyner, a versatile defensive back who had spent 5 seasons with the Los Angeles Rams playing intelligently in Sean McVay's modern scheme, to a 4-year, $42 million contract at $10.5 million per season. It immediately fell apart. Quarterbacks targeting Joyner in the first 6 games of 2019 posted a 121.5 passer rating against him. He allowed 16 catches on 17 catchable targets in that span. His own team's analytics ranked him last among all Raiders defensive backs. The issue was fundamental. Joyner had thrived in Los Angeles in zone coverage, with freedom to read the play. In Oakland's strict man-to-man system, he was a completely different and far less effective player. He lasted 2 seasons, was quietly released, and immediately signed by the New York Jets for $2.6 million annually, roughly a quarter of what Oakland had been paying him. They spent $42 million on a scheme-fit mismatch they should have identified before the ink dried. Number 7, Lamar Woodley, 2014. 2-year contract, approximately $12 million. Lamar Woodley had been genuinely great in Pittsburgh, a 2-time Pro Bowl linebacker who recorded double-digit sacks in 3 consecutive seasons between 2008 and 2010. 35 combined sacks over those 3 extraordinary years. He had a Super Bowl ring. He had been one of the most dangerous edge rushers in the entire AFC. He had also missed 9 games in the 2 seasons immediately before Oakland signed him due to a compounding series of ankle, hamstring, and calf injuries that were beginning to tell a very clear story. Pittsburgh had seen enough and released him. The Raiders signed him anyway. In his 1 season with Oakland, Woodley appeared in 6 games with 5 starts. He recorded 5 total tackles. 5. Before a biceps injury effectively ended his tenure with the team, he had managed to record 5 combined tackles in his entire Raiders career. He was released after 1 year. The official Raiders historical roster on Raiders.com confirms the number. 6 games, 5 starts, 5 total tackles. That is the complete Raiders career of a player who was, in his prime years, one of the most feared pass rushers in professional football. They saw the name on the resume. They ignored what the injury history was telling them, and they paid the price. Number 6, Jabril Wilson, 2008. 6-year, $39 million contract. Al Davis had a very specific and well-documented pattern in free agency. He loved signing players who had just done something spectacular on the biggest stage. Fresh off Jabril Wilson's contributions to the Giants' shocking Super Bowl 42 victory over the undefeated New England Patriots, Davis signed Wilson to a 6-year, $39 million deal, making him one of the 3 highest-paid safeties in the entire NFL at that moment, sitting alongside only Troy Polamalu and Bob Sanders. Wilson had been solid in New York. In his 4 seasons with the Giants, he started 51 of 52 games and recorded 360 tackles and 11 interceptions. He was reliable and professional in a defense that had exceptional talent around him, masking his limitations in pass coverage. In Oakland, those limitations had nowhere to hide. He finished his 1 season with the Raiders with 129 tackles and 2 interceptions, while struggling in coverage repeatedly in ways that directly contributed to points allowed. The Raiders released him on February 20th, 2009, after exactly 1 season on a 6-year contract, and he immediately signed with the Miami Dolphins on a new multi-year deal. $16 million in guaranteed money spent on a player who lasted 365 days. 6 years committed, 1 year delivered. Number 5, Larry Brown, 1996. 5-year, $12.5 million contract. This is the signing that established the Raiders' single most dangerous pattern. Al Davis watching a player perform brilliantly on the biggest stage in football and immediately writing that player a massive check without asking whether the performance reflected the player's true, sustainable level or simply the perfect circumstances of a single extraordinary night. Larry Brown had intercepted 2 passes in Super Bowl 30 as a Dallas Cowboy, winning the MVP award and becoming the first and only cornerback in history to receive that honor. He entered free agency as perhaps the most talked about name on the market. Dallas released him due to a salary cap situation, and Davis signed him to a 5-year, $12.5 million contract on February 20th, immediately after the game ended. The problem was that Brown had been a number 2 cornerback his entire career, playing opposite Deion Sanders on a dynasty team loaded with Hall of Fame talent. He had his career night in a perfect environment. Oakland was not that environment. Brown missed most of 1996 with a foot injury. In 1997, he was demoted to a backup role and then suspended 4 games for conduct detrimental to the team. He played only 12 games across 2 seasons, starting exactly 1. He was waived in June of 1998, having recorded 1 interception as a Raider. The following year, Davis signed the very next Super Bowl MVP, return man Desmond Howard, to another deal. Some patterns are extremely difficult to break.
Number 4, DeAngelo Hall, 2008. 7-year, $70 million contract plus draft capital. In the same catastrophic 2008 offseason that produced the Jabril Wilson disaster, Al Davis engineered something even more damaging. He traded a 2nd round and a 5th round pick to the Atlanta Falcons to acquire cornerback DeAngelo Hall, and immediately handed Hall a 7-year, $70 million contract with $24.5 million guaranteed. Hall had been a genuine star in Atlanta, a 2-time Pro Bowl cornerback, physically gifted and explosive. The vision was to pair him opposite Nnamdi Asomugha and give the Raiders arguably the most talented cornerback duo in the NFL. On paper, he was inspired. In reality, it became one of the most expensive 8-game disasters in professional football history. Opposing quarterbacks threw at Hall 66 times across 8 games. He allowed 40 catches for 552 yards, surrendering more coverage yards than any defender in the entire league through that point in the season. He was beaten for a 37-yard touchdown by his former Atlanta receiver Michael Jenkins in a 24-0 loss to his old team in what was supposed to be his signature performance wearing silver and black. The Raiders waived him in November 2008. He walked away with $8 million for 8 games of the worst football of his professional life. Oakland had also surrendered a 2nd-round pick just to acquire him. They paid for Hall twice, in cash and in future, and received nothing in return either way. He rebuilt his career in Washington, made another Pro Bowl in 2010, and played over a decade more. The Raiders received 8 games and a very expensive list.
Number 3, Jimmy Garoppolo, 2023. 3-year, $72.75 million contract. When Josh McDaniels became the Raiders head coach, he had one quarterback in mind, Jimmy Garoppolo. They had worked together in New England. McDaniels believed in him with the conviction of a man who had seen Garoppolo operate in a championship system and knew he was the answer. In March of 2023, the Raiders signed Garoppolo to a 3-year, $72.75 million contract with $33.75 million guaranteed. The warning signs were visible immediately. Garoppolo had just undergone foot surgery days after signing the deal. He had not appeared in more than 11 games in a single season since 2019. The contract contained a special injury waiver, known as Addendum G, giving the Raiders the right to void portions if his foot did not heal. He passed his physical in July, but the injury history was not a rumor. It was a documented and recurring pattern. In his one season as a Raider, Garoppolo started 6 games.
He suffered a concussion in Week 3 against Pittsburgh. He was benched by incoming interim coach Antonio Pierce in favor of fourth-round rookie Aiden O'Connell after McDaniels was fired. He was released in March of 2024, also carrying a 2-game NFL suspension for a performance-enhancing drug policy violation, and left the organization with $28 million in dead cap money following him out the door. 3 years and $72 million. 6 starts, a suspension, and a benching that ended his tenure before the halfway point of his first season. The Garoppolo signing became the clearest symbol of the entire McDaniels era. Expensive, sentimental, and completely disconnected from the realities of what this team actually needed.
Number 2, Chandler Jones, 2022. A 3-year, $51 million contract. The story of Chandler Jones and the Las Vegas Raiders begins with genuine hope and ends in a way that no football story ever should. Jones was a legitimate Hall of Fame candidate when he arrived in Las Vegas in March of 2022. A 4-time Pro Bowl pass rusher, 112 career sacks at the time of signing, 6 dominant seasons in Arizona where he had been one of the most feared edge rushers in the sport. The Raiders signed him to a 3-year, $51 million contract with $32 million guaranteed to pair alongside Max Crosby and give Las Vegas the elite pass rush duo the franchise had not possessed in decades. In his first season, Jones recorded 4.5 sacks in 15 games, including a dramatic game-winning fumble return for a touchdown against New England in Week 15. But he was never the dominant force the Raiders paid for. And then, in the summer of 2023, everything collapsed. Before the season opener, Jones began posting erratic content on social media, claiming the Raiders had locked him out of their facility. Over the following weeks, the posts escalated, targeting the owner, coaches, and former NFL players. He was placed on the non-football illness list and did not play a single game in 2023. On September 29th, he was arrested in Las Vegas on 2 counts of violating a domestic violence protection order. He was released the following day. The Raiders released a statement saying they were hopeful Jones receives the care that he needs. It was the most genuinely compassionate and honest sentence the organization released in connection with this entire chapter. This was not simply a football failure. Chandler Jones never played another professional snap. The Raiders were left with $51 million committed to a player who gave them 1 season of 4.5 sacks and a story that ended not in disappointment, but in heartbreak. Number 1, Javon Walker, 2008. 6-year, $55 million contract. If you want to understand why the Raiders spent years being used as a cautionary tale, why this organization's free agency history carries a specific kind of shame, you trace it back to March of 2008. You trace it back to Javon Walker. Walker had been a real Pro Bowl wide receiver. He crossed 1,000 receiving yards in both 2004 and 2006 with the Green Bay Packers. He had genuine talent, size, and the deep ball ability Al Davis had always coveted. He also had a torn ACL in 2004, an injury-plagued stint in Denver, and had not played a full, healthy professional season in years. The Broncos released him. No team was aggressively pursuing him. He was 30 years old. His body had issued multiple warnings. Davis signed him to a 6-year, $55 million contract with $16 million guaranteed. 3 months after signing, before he had played a single snap for the Raiders, Walker was found unconscious on the Las Vegas Strip in the early hours of the morning, robbed and beaten, requiring hospitalization and recovery that extended into training camp. He arrived in Oakland physically diminished, mentally shaken, and carrying damage his body had never fully healed from. In his first Raiders season, Walker threatened to retire during training camp, caught 15 passes for 196 yards, and was injured in the second half of the year. In 2009, he appeared in 3 games and caught 0 passes. 0. He was released. 15 catches, 196 yards, 1 touchdown, 11 games, on a 6-year, $55 million contract. The Raiders paid approximately $1.4 million per reception. The Las Vegas Review-Journal has documented that when Raiders fans discuss the worst free agent signing in franchise history, Walker's name is still the first one spoken, 17 years later. He was not a villain. In his prime, he was a legitimate NFL talent. But this was the single most catastrophically misguided investment in Raiders history. A broken player on a contract built for the healthy version of himself. $55 million. 15 catches. The number that defines Raiders free agency failure more than any other in franchise history. 10 signings, 10 failures. Hundreds of millions of dollars spent chasing yesterday's version of players who could no longer deliver what they were being paid to deliver. What separates the Raiders is not that they made mistakes. Every franchise in this league has gotten it wrong in free agency. What separates the Raiders is that they made the same mistakes repeatedly across multiple decades. The same pattern of falling in love with a name in a moment, rather than a full body of work. Hit that like button right now and subscribe to the channel. We are inside NFL history every week, and there is far more of the Raiders story left to tell. New videos coming very soon. We will see you there.